It's actually good to see Glen in one place rather than zipping around Eastbourne.
Yeah, yeah.
I could take this with me. I could.
No.
I might get seasick.
So, just I suppose a bit more of a wider introduction to some people. For Glen's, I suppose, background as well, is that what I've done in my ministry here at Emmanuel Church in Saltburn at St Thomas's Church in Newmask is that I've used some of your materials, Glen, the 3-2-1, the story of God, the world, and you, carol services and school services. We've used some of your videos like The Gift and the Nativity, and of course, most recently, the Seeing the Future series. So your face and your words are familiar to a number of people in my congregation, so that's a really big blessing, and I just want to thank you for what you have offered me and my ministry and the churches here in that small way. But before I say anything else, I think one thing I do want to just say is thank you for penning that wonderful hymn, "We Have a Lamb." That became a real feature of our Zoom services, and was a bit like a signature tune for maybe not just for us, but for many people, obviously. And how those words and that song became a real blessing during this past year.
Oh well, pleasure. It was like a poem that became a tweet thread that somebody else just picked up and wrote the most beautiful tune to. So yeah, I was thrilled with what Phil Moore did, but it was brilliant. Yeah.
So what I'll do, I'll mute everyone and Glen can unmute himself, because that means that whatever Glen wants to say will be a bit clearer, and then we'll just, as they take it from there. If you have some questions for Glen, I suppose we'll just open it up and have some questions if something comes to mind.
Yeah, good. So yes, I'm Glen. I'm Emma's husband. I'm Ruby and JJ's dad, and from Australia originally. Lived half my life in the UK, and give or take the odd deportation, I've mainly been in the UK. Yeah, certainly for the last 25 years. So so live here in Eastbourne at the moment, and part of the work, I'm Anglican ordained minister. I was curate at All Souls Eastbourne, and then I took a job with an evangelistic charity that at the time was called the Hour of Revival, and so it was Eric Hutchings's old evangelistic charity, and so he was very much into the big multi, the kind of the mass interdenominational evangelism thing. He would put on crusades back when they called them crusades, and he was kind of known for that preaching ministry, as well as he had a radio ministry. So he had a very popular radio show called the Hour of Revival, hence the name of the charity, and so it was that twin focus of preaching the gospel and taking advantage of the media of the day. And he was into pirate radio and was quite pioneering in the media of his day. And I guess we still try to do the same thing today. I preach the gospel around the place. I help out with different outreaches that churches want to put on, or that perhaps Christian unions want to put on in schools or universities. So that's a kind of the preaching aspect of what I do. But then I also try to make the most of the new media that is so prominent in people's lives these days. So I was reading the other day that there are 2.3 billion monthly users on Facebook, and there are about 2 billion monthly users on YouTube. So, if those places were countries, they'd be the biggest countries on planet Earth. Who's trying to reach them? And I guess we at Speak Life are trying to reach them. And if you want to go onto Facebook, for instance, if you're a Facebooker, you can search for Speak Life UK, and we have a little daily video, for instance, that helps you go through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. It takes a phrase at a time through the Bible, a phrase that's become famous and passed into common parlance, and I kind of explain that sort of every morning on Facebook, and we do weekly videos on YouTube. We do sort of seasonal videos on YouTube. Tomorrow we are filming a harvest video called Harvest Cheer, which will be a lot of fun. You can ask me about that if you want to. And so we do these seasonal videos like Easter, like Remembrance Day, like Halloween, like Christmas. And we try to sort of resource the church with those sorts of things. And sometimes we do series like we did Seeing the Future. And sometimes we produce resources like 321. So 321 is my gospel presentation that talks about the threeness of God and the two-ness of the world and the oneness of you. And if you want to ask me more about that, perhaps you know what the numbers mean, but I can explain more about that. But maybe my segue into hospitality would be that the controlling image that I use in 321 is of a house, but Christianity is a house. And from the outside, your friends and family and neighbors and work colleagues think it's nuts. And how does that thing work? And how does that bit of the house attach to that bit of the house? And the kids are squabbling upstairs, and the signposting is dreadful, and who knows the way into this house? And really, the way I conceive of evangelism, the way I conceive of sort of explaining the faith to and inviting people to Jesus, is not building stepping stones from the house. I don't think our job really is to say to people, here's this reasonable truth, and if you believe in this reasonable truth, then here's this other reasonable truth that I can lead you to. And if you also believe in that, then it's a hop, skip, and a jump to the next stepping stone, and then the next stepping stone, and then maybe you'll find yourself at the Christian house. I don't think it's like that. I think Jesus in Luke chapter 7, he said, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, which is quite a mission statement, isn't it? When you think of all the times that Jesus says, the Son of Man came, you're expecting this incredible mission statement, and you're expecting him to say, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many, which is what Mark chapter 10, verse 45 says. But Jesus in Luke chapter 7 is really in this area of hospitality. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. And I think whenever you want to find Jesus in the Gospels, look for him around the dinner table. That's kind of where he will be. And if he's not at a dinner, he's telling people to put on more, dinners and invite more people to their houses, or he's telling people that heaven is a great feast and you're invited. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. And I think the mission of the church really is this hospitable thing. So think of the conversion of Matthew. Matthew was the tax collector, and there he was doing his wicked work, a collaborator with the Romans, and he is stealing far too much money from his own people and giving it to the hated Romans. And Jesus, in the midst of that sin, says, Matthew, follow me. And Matthew follows Jesus. And the very first thing Matthew does is put on a dinner party. And he invites all his friends. And so you've got the sinners and tax collectors at the meal with Jesus. And it's the most hilarious detail, isn't it, that the Pharisees try to gate crash this party. I mean, they're not the people you think of when you think of party animals, are they, the Pharisees? But somehow they gate crash the party and then complain about the guest list, which is quite a silly thing for a gate crasher to do, isn't it? And there they are. They say, why does your they say to the disciples, why does your teacher eat and drink with sinners and tax collectors? And you'll know the great line, what a comeback from Jesus. From the center of the party, Jesus pipes up and answers their question. And he says, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. And that is the nature of Jesus's mission. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. He calls sinners to himself, and really he only calls sinners to himself because there's no one else in actuality to answer the call. If you do not recognize yourself as a sinner, then you are like, one of those people who you know, Eastbourne is famous for being the retirement capital of the UK, and it sort of is. But you know, Eastbourne is full of people who they'll have a hacking great cough, but they're fine. They're absolutely fine. And you know, they've had a problem with their hip for the last 6 months, but they're fine. They're fine. And at times you have to kind of just like get them into the car and drive them to the doctor. And yeah, I don't know if you're the same, but even as a younger person, I feel like I have to wait until I have lots of things wrong with me before I go to the doctor. Are you the same? You wait until you've got at least 7 things wrong, because you don't want to waste their time. You don't want to step into a doctor's surgery and say, I've got this, you know, this tiny little rash, and for them to say, it's nothing, you're wasting my time. You certainly don't want to go into the doctor's surgery and say, I'm a picture of perfect health. I thought you'd be impressed. You know, they won't be impressed at that point. Doctors are for sick people, and Jesus is for sinners. And he really is only for sinners, right? That's the shock. And so, you know, over this house, this Christian house, there could be a welcome sign that says, Christianity, you know, welcome one and all. Sinners only, though. You must be a sinner. The righteous need not apply. This is the implication of what Jesus is saying. It's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick. I've not come to call righteous people, but sinners. So you've got this interesting thing with the Christian house. It is doors flung wide open, and anyone can come as long as they admit their sickness. It's a beautiful thing about the NHS, isn't it? Beautiful thing about the NHS. It's free at the point of access, but just don't come to A&E claiming that you're a picture of perfect health. At that point, you're not welcome, right? The only people who are welcome are the ones who say they need it. And so there is this incredible welcome where the Son of Man comes eating and drinking, and we in the church, we fling open the doors of the church, and we come eating and drinking, and we say, I'm a mess, how about you? I'm spiritually sick, how about you? I'm hungry and I need bread, how about you? And in all these things, we say, if you're a mess, here's the one who washes us clean. If you're sick, here's the spiritual doctor. If you're hungry, here's the bread of life. And so hospitality is right at the heart of the church's mission, because I don't think our bridge into the culture is building stepping stones and trying to be incredibly clever. I think it's far more about sticking the kettle on, laying the table, flinging wide the doors, and let God bring who he's going to bring. And what's interesting is that at that stage, God doesn't bring the polished people and the spiritually healthy people. When you start to have that mentality, he starts to bring the people who know they need bread, who know they need a wash, who know they need a spiritual doctor. And I think that's what you find when you have a sort of a hospitality first mission out into the world. If you lead into the world with Christians are incredibly together and they know, you know, we know how to live, well, you'll only attract other people who know how to live. Or if your entree into the culture is, we are very clever people and we understand the ways of the culture, then you'll attract together clever people. But if in the way of Jesus you open up the doors and you say the Son of Man came eating and drinking and he only eats with sinners and tax collectors, so come and join the party with all us other spiritually unhealthy people, church starts to become a lot messier, and it starts to become a lot more attractive to a lot more people. Because at that stage, your friends and neighbors and family members, they start to realize they can drop the mask. They can drop the act. They can be the sinner that they really are. And at that stage, the welcome is for them. So those are just some opening thoughts, really, on Christianity as a house, the mission of the church being hospitality, and some of the implications of that. And some of the implications are hospitality means that church starts to become a lot messier and a lot more attractive. What do people think about that?
Do you unmute yourself and throw something back at Glenn? Anything that's struck you in what he said there? You stunned them to silence. One interesting thing that's happened. Oh, Richard, go on. Yeah.
But we got lots of great stuff going on in our church. So really good house groups, men's and women's breakfasts, working schools, food bank, charity for teenagers and stuff like that. So we don't need to beat ourselves up too much. The area that concerns me is so kids really, and you know, some of us are old enough to have been to Sunday school and all that kind of good stuff. I think we're struggling to attract families and kids and struggling to get people in the church involved in that. And I think if we don't do that, in 20 years' time, we'll be out of business. And I just wondered if you could talk about hospitality to kids and how you know, the current church model clearly isn't working. What do we need to do to attract kids?
Yeah, big one. I've never myself been a youth worker or that kind of thing. I mean, at times I've been, you know, part of youth groups and part of youth group leadership. So I certainly don't speak as any kind of expert on youth and that kind of thing. But I think there's a danger in seeing youth as a segmented target that we go after, as opposed to families and that being, you know, the units. And you might come back at me and just say, well, that's also a problem where we're not attracting the families that have such children and youth in them. Because I mean, but the reason why I want to put youth together with their families is that the number one evangelists and disciplers of children, you know, is their parents. And you know, there are ways of, okay, you put on a great holiday club, and holiday clubs are brilliant. You know, our church has them, and lots of churches have them. But if that becomes the way of reaching children and youth, divorced from the families that are around them. One youth worker friend of mine sort of says, you know, the danger is it's like climbing into the house through the bedroom window to chat to the kids and not going in through the front door to talk to mum and dad. And I think, which is not to say, you know, don't do kids clubs. We do kids clubs. But it is to say, in your eagerness to attract kids, I would just sort of widen out the target to how do we be more family friendly, and that's really difficult if you don't have 2 or 3 families that are already there. Then you'll often get the experience, and I know lots of friends in churches like this where they don't really have the 2 or 3 families that form a core, and then you have a new family come to town and they try out your church on one Sunday and they look around and there's no one else, and they think, oh, if only, and you kind of think, you know, I wish just 2 families would show up on the same Sunday, and then you can sort of start a group like that. It's got to be a prayerful thing. You know, I'm sure Adam can think about ways into schools that he's spoken about the various schools that he kind of gets into, and you know, there are ways of going into the schools, and there are ways of that. But I would just the where my mind goes is I can think of lots of ways of you put on a 5-a-side, you know, football tournament or something, you know. there are ways of targeting kids, but that target them kind of atomistically. And I would just urge that the question be broader, and how do you go for families? But
I agree. I mean, it's not just about hospitality, is it? Hospitality has got to be a pathway to something else. You're not just laying on spag bol on a Friday. It needs to develop into some kind of relationship with the church, but through that with God.
Yes. I love in 1 Peter has got the shortest gifts list in the New Testament. Sometimes Paul has these gifts lists and they're really quite extended, but in 1 Peter chapter 4, there are 2 gifts on the list. He says, if your gift is speaking, then speak as speaking with the very words of God. If your gift is serving, then serve with the strength that God supplies. And the serving word is the deacon word, and it's very much associated with hospitality. It's very much associated with opening up your homes and opening up tables. And what I think Peter is sort of showing is that actually in all the gifts lists that you've got in the New Testament, you've basically got 2 different kind of umbrella terms for gifts. Some people are very good with their lips. Some people are very good with their hands. Some people are very good speaking. Some people are very good serving. What would it be to get those gifts working together? And when you get those gifts working together, you have mission the way it happens in the Gospels. You have mission the way it happens in Acts. You have mission the way it happens in the early church, which is it's the spag bowl and the gospel preached. You get those 2 things kind of coming together, and you really are cooking with gas to keep the hospitality thing going. So,
Thank you. Thanks. It's good. Thank you.
Anyone else throw something Glenn's way?
Some spag bol.
Spag bol, don't throw the spag bol there. Or anything that anyone wants to say around the theme of hospitality that Glenn's spoken of there, or anything about Speak Life's ministry or the films that we watched, seeing the future. Broaden out. Well, once you got Glenn there, throw anything at him actually. Yeah. You stunned to silence. I mean, one interesting thing that happened to us, Glenn, over the last few weeks is that we set ourselves here at Emmanuel Church to read the entire Bible from beginning to end, which took us about 80 odd hours, but we started early on a Monday morning, read roughly 12 hours a day, and it increased it as we got through to the weekend. But towards the end of the week, and it echoes what you said about open doors, and we were just talking about this at evening prayer tonight, a young lad, 17-year-old, came through the doors on the Saturday and said, I've just come through because every time I've walked past this church for the last week, the doors have been open and the lights have been on. And he said, well, what's going on? So someone who was there spoke to him and said, this is what's happening and this is what we're doing. Anyway, he came to church on the Sunday morning and I had a conversation with him, and I spoke with him, actually gave him a copy of 321 and said, if you want to have a read of look at the videos, and just come back to me. Anyway, I was away last Sunday, but apparently he came to church last Sunday as well. So it's like that's almost a microcosm of this story in action.
Yeah.
And the big question for me is, and for I suppose us as a church is, right, the Lord sent him to us, in that sense, he's opening up some path. What is our community like as a church without really many other 17-year-olds active? What will we do to kind of nurture him and love him and allow him to flourish?
I don't know, but if he's come in on that basis, how brilliant. He hasn't come in like because imagine he'd come in because you put on a film night and you'd showed some Marvel comic book film and it was all whiz bang and there was a 2.5-minute gospel presentation at the end, and so he came back next week. At that point you're thinking, well, what has he been attracted to? And therefore in a sense you need to be careful with what you win people with, because that's what they're going to hang around for. He has come for the Bible. Wonderful. And if he hangs around, he'll hang around to hear more of Christ from his word. And at that stage, a multi-generational church with some wisdom behind it might be exactly what a 17-year-old needs. And I know that's really countercultural, because we think, I know what a 17-year-old needs: pizza. So let's just like lots of pizza, and that's, you know, and you build your youth work around pizza. But then, you know, when they move out of home and move town, if it's the pizza that grabbed them, it's not, you know, they will not hang around for Jesus. But if they come for Jesus, they'll stay for Jesus. And we so segment society, and we have such a such a segmented society that is not integrated, that is there is a segregation in society, and there's a segregation in churches that we kind of reinforce. And so, you know, in our church, we've got the 0 to 5s, and we've got the 5 to 7s, and we've got the 8 to 11s, and we've got the 11s to 14s, and we've got the 14s to 18s. And, you know, they go out of church to do their thing, and I wonder whether this 17-year-old might have a taste of the beauty of an integrated, multi-generational church, where people can teach. If he wants to hang around 17-year-olds, there are plenty of ways for him to hang around 17-year-olds. If he's going to come on a Sunday to hear from the scriptures and to hear about Christ, it might just be that hanging around people with a heck of a lot more life experience is the most shaping thing in his life. So, yeah, that's just a thought off the top of my head.
One other
the Church of England has segmented itself, so we're a bunch of 45 plus white middle class people.
Yeah,
So we are a segment in ourselves. That's what we made ourselves.
yeah.
But we're getting old.
We can still be families who welcome younger people into our, you know, even though, you know, most of us are old enough to be this person's grandparents, we could still. Sorry, off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think we make a big mistake. There's a lot of sort of church planters who want to start in a university town because they want to grab those 18 to 21-year-olds who like talking about big ideas, and you have this university focused church, and you know, there are even services at which you know, basically they're all kind of late teenagers, but the families come in the morning, but the teenagers come in the evening, and those are high octane, intense, and sometimes very formative churches for people until they hit 21, and then they've got to go and get a proper job somewhere, and they've got to join a church, and an actual common or garden church, which is family, and they've got to muck in, and they've got and it is not this homogenous thing that so much of youth work can be, and so much of student work can be. And actually, you know, I always recommend to students that are going away to churches, don't just go for the very popular student church, because actually, like, this is your one opportunity to escape the tiny little student bubble that you're in, and to be involved in the multi-generational discipleship that God has planned for us. So again, I just think with this 17-year-old, rejoice. He'll have plenty of time during the week to spend his days with other 17-year-olds. And if he's coming through the word, wonderful. Just keep giving him the word, and see what God does. Maybe he will be the 17-year-old who is there when another 17-year-old shows up, you know, the following Sunday. Maybe, but even if not, you've got Christ. You can offer him Christ, even if you can't offer him pizza or other teenagers, you know.
One thing I have encouraged people to do, Glenn, over the last month or so, is to get a copy of Rebecca McLaughlin's book, 10 Questions Every Teen Should Ask and Answer. I know that you, on a couple of occasions, have interviewed Rebecca, and certainly in terms of thinking around kind kind of questions that young people might have. That's a very good book, and Rebecca obviously puts her points across very clearly. I don't know if you've if you've spoken with her about that book in your conversation.
Yeah, I think in my work with sort of teens and students, I'm finding more and more that it's, you know, the issue is not that they have a settled opinion about Christianity, and you need to answer questions about you know, seeming contradictions in the gospel accounts or something like that, because I mean people know so little. They don't know how to have good questions, and the real problem obviously is apathy. You know, rather than dogmatic atheism. I think what we tend to encounter these days is just, you know, ignorance, and I just think we shouldn't be cowed by that. So, you know, I live in Eastbourne, the retirement capital of the UK. I travel around to sort of students, and so I've always got this rule of thumb about, you know, whenever I'm with, you know, the over 65s, and they tell me that they're a Christian, I don't immediately believe them, right? Because, you know, there's such a thing as cultural Christianity, isn't there? And 65 years ago, it was a lot easier to take the Christian label off the shelf and sort of put it on and present yourself to the world. And somebody says, "What are you?" And you say, "I'm Christian. Obviously, I was baptized. I'm English. Of course, I'm Christian." And there's such a thing as nominal Christianity, isn't there? So that's an issue with an over 65-year-old. And an over 65-year-old says they're Christian, and inwardly I'm thinking, yeah, they might well be, well, they might not be. Let's talk about Jesus. When I talk to a sort of an under 35 and they tell me that they're an atheist, I don't believe them. And I don't believe them for exactly the same reason. Because for the last 35 years, it's been relatively straightforward to put the atheist label on, or the agnostic label on, and to go out into the world. And if somebody says, you know, what do you believe? People will tell you straight off the bat they're an atheist. And teenagers and Christians can get really cowed by this, because a teenager will say they're an atheist, and we're like, oh no, they clearly have very settled beliefs, and they are a philosophical naturalist, and this means that they will have this view, this view, this view. They don't have views. It's just, there is such a thing as nominal atheism. Of course there is. And it operates exactly like nominal Christianity used to operate. It's just a label. You get behind the label. And so your youth, you know, your youth will tell you that they're an atheist, but, you know, you can ask them, what are you praying for at the moment? And quite often they were like, oh, actually, my grandma's going in for an operation, so I'm praying for, like, what atheist means these days is it's a label. And so, you know, very often if somebody, and this is very common among teenagers, but if somebody is an atheist, I just say, oh, which God don't you believe in? And, you know, and you know who they describe? They describe the God they don't believe in is this bearded individual, high on power, low on personality, very distant, thunderbolt ready to hurl. And you just say, that's Zeus. I don't believe in Zeus. Can I tell you about Jesus? Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. Nobody knows what God is like. That's why the Greeks had so many of them, because they're just clueless. And the Romans had so many of them. And the Norse had so many of them that nobody knows what God is like. But Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Jesus is what God is like. And so for teens and for anybody else, it's really a case of whatever questions get raised. My default answer is always, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. But have you checked out this guy, Jesus? Because he's incredible. You know, so if the question is suffering, it's like, oh my goodness, what a suffering world this truly is. I don't know the answer to why God allowed that thing to happen to your dad. I don't know. But can I tell you about Jesus, who entered into suffering to the greatest degree and bore it for you and rose up again to offer you a life beyond it. I don't know the answer to why this suffering happened in that way, but I have not found someone like Jesus who can walk with me through suffering. And that's the sort of thing that starts to connect, especially with generations that are far more relational, and they don't perhaps need the polished philosophical answers, but they do need to know that it works. And just the other brief thing I'll say about teenagers and that age is, it is really difficult to be a teenager right now. And the identity issues are just intense. And putting a foot wrong is this crippling fear. To have the wrong view about sex or sexuality or gender or any of these issues, veganism, whatever. There's really strong moral beliefs right now. Which is a shock to Christians, because we always think that, if you walk away from Jesus, then you become very laissez-faire about your morality and all that kind of stuff. Not so. Not so. These days, people are incredibly moralistic, incredibly righteous, and incredibly ready to hurl accusations of heresy at people and burn them at the stake and exclude them from friendship groups and excommunicate them and do all this sort of stuff. And what I would lead with is, like, where do you find love and where do you find forgiveness? Because in a fractured world, everyone's looking for comfort, entertainment, identity, in spades. What we are so lacking is a true sense of acceptance and love and forgiveness. Because what is the way back for any of these, England cricketer made tweets about 10 years ago and, nearly got cancelled for horrendous things that he said 10 years ago. And there was nearly no way back for him. And that is, so a community of actual acceptance, of actual grace, of actual forgiveness, that is sounding more and more attractive, I think, to teenage years. Yeah.
Is that what attracted you to Jesus? Can I ask you, how old were you when you came to know Jesus?
I don't know when to. So I could tell you a story in which I could tell you two true stories, and one of them is got a believing mum. She's the only other Christian in our household, but she would take me along to church, and I was a good church kid in that sense and knew all the right answers. But by the time I went away to university, I kind of left that childhood faith behind me and tried to have as good a time as I could without Jesus. And then it was a bit of a kind of a prodigal son returning moment, when at the end of my university years, I had some big dreams that were kind of torpedoed. And I ended up going to church in my final year. And I remember hating the preacher every Sunday, because he thought he was so cool with his, he would make references to EastEnders and think that he had his finger on the cultural pulse, the idiot. And I just thought he was trying too hard. But then I would go back again the next Sunday to hate him some more, and then to hate him some more. And of course, in the background, there's a praying mother, right? So the short answer to the question, why am I a Christian? 2 decades of a praying mother, right? And then I'm not sure whether I was yet over the line in terms of trusting Christ, but looking for work after university, I picked up the Gospels and started reading through. And I do remember getting halfway through Luke's Gospel and thinking Jesus is immense, incredible, awesome. He's it, head honcho, numero uno. And I guess at that stage I was saying he's Lord. And I take it from Romans chapter 10, that's sort of what it takes. You know, if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And so that was kind of when Christ became really real to me.
And attractive.
And yeah, it's like, you know, you don't need an argument to realize that the sun is bright. You don't need an argument to realize that honey is sweet. And in a sense, you don't need an argument to prove that Jesus is Lord. It's like, well, just taste and see. Look at him. If he's not God, who is? You know. And I guess that's been very formative in the way I think of evangelism, because the way I think of evangelism is basically opening up the Bible with people and saying, look at him. Do you like him? Isn't he great?
Got to get that 15-year-old, haven't you, who has no interest in anything to even, you know, look at a Bible. You know, I mean, you know, it's difficult, isn't it? You know, who has no interest in Jesus, don't you know? And you just said, well, look how attractive Jesus is. And that doesn't really work, does it?
Well, there's different ways. You know, there's go and tell evangelism, and so part of what Speak Life does is, well, let's start a TikTok channel and let's get on YouTube and let's be in these places. And so you cast the lines out that way. And then there's the come and hear evangelism, and there is you fling the doors wide open and you read through the Bible one week, and God is the great evangelist, you know.
What's amazing is young people are attracted to all sorts of Marvel stuff and Minecraft and Harry Potter and all that kind of stuff. You know, having been part of reading the whole Bible, we have the best stories ever.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's how do we get these great stories over? They're there in the Bible, great, amazing characters who would knock Marvel heroes off the face of the earth. And getting that over, I think, is important.
Yeah. So like last Easter, we did a couple of videos that were about, so one of them was called Sacrifice at the Cinema. And we just went through why are certainly all superhero films are, you know, the hero gets pummeled to death, essentially, and we know what happens next. Somehow there's this resurrection scene where he, you know, defeats the baddie and gets the girl, and there's a happily ever after. You know, the reason why all these Marvel things are like they're turning the crank is, you know, there are historical reasons for it. Carl Jung was a Catholic psychologist who, meditating on the Christ story, had a disciple called Joseph Campbell, who started writing what the Christ story is as this circle where, you know, the hero goes down into a pit and somehow rises again, but once he's risen again, there's a new world. And literally, I mean, I've been to screenwriting seminars where like the top guys just take you through the plot points, and you sit there and you think, this is familiar in two different senses. It's familiar in that every single film I ever see takes this shape, and it's familiar because it is the Christ story, and you can't really tell any other kind of story. So we often try to preach the gospel through stories in that way, and just wake people up to just how prevalent this thing is. So I'll go into schools and I'll do this thing called love story, and I'll say, we'll do a choose your own adventure, kids. All right, I'll start the story off and you tell us how the story should develop. Once upon a time there was a great kingdom and everybody was very happy, and there was a king and a princess, and the end. Is that a good story? No, that's not a story. Something needs to happen. Okay, what should happen? Something nice or something nasty? And the kids know something nasty should happen. You know, it's too nice right now. We need something. Okay, so the dragon comes and picks up the princess and flies off to, you know, to keep her captive. What should happen now? Should the king say, oh, well, plenty more princesses where that came from. Easy come, easy go. Or should there be a rescue? There should be a rescue. And you take them through and you say, well, there's going to be a knight. And should it be easy for him to get the princess? No, there should be a fight to the death. Okay, so he fights the dragon to the death and he gets the girl and he brings her back to the king. What should happen at the end? And every kid knows what should happen at the end. You know, they should get married. The knight and the princess should get married. You know, only if she wants to, obviously. You know, she's been through a great ordeal. She might need some counseling. There'll be some 12-step programs. She'll have all sorts of complicated feelings about her captor. But at the end of all things, you know, maybe they could get together and they get married and there's a happily ever after. And every single kid knows that's how the story should go. Why? Because we're living in a story. And we're all characters in a great story. And a hero has come. And he has fought the dragon to get the girl. And he offers us the feast. So there's lots of ways in with story, definitely.
Good stuff. Well, approaching at roughly the hour, you know, short of the hour mark. Glenn, do you want to say something about how, you know, with looking towards the future of Speak Life this year, and you mentioned about Harvest, any ways we could, you know, support Speak Life as well as support us?
Well, if you're on, for instance, I mean, we're on all the socials. So if you're on Facebook, for instance, Speak Life UK is the place to find us there, and you can keep up with what we do. If you like podcasts, we've got a podcast. If you're on YouTube, then again, look for Speak Life there. We've got a channel always trying to do new stuff. So tomorrow we're filming this Harvest video. It's going to be we're really looking forward to this. We've got this. We're working on the soundtrack at the moment. It's We Plow the Fields and Scatter, but it's done as a reggae tune. And you don't realize that it's We Plow the Fields and Scatter until the very last shot. Because actually that song sounds very much like Bob Marley, Don't Worry About a Thing, when you do it the way we do it. And so it's about a guy called Mr. Thankful, and he's just so grateful, and he wakes up and he, you know, pours out his Cheerios, and it's bliss. Who do I thank for the Cheerios? And he sees there's a number on the cereal box, so he phones up the number. Who do I thank for the Cheerios? And then he gets out and he thanks the bin man, and he thanks the train station manager, even though all the trains are cancelled and he has to go on the rail replacement bus. And he thanks everybody at work, and he thanks everybody at lunch, and he thanks everybody at dinner. And then at night, you see him sort of, his eyes spring open, and he realizes there's one person he has not thanked. And so the final shot is him with his eyes up saying, thank you. And that's when we sort of reveal that the song that's been playing the whole time is We Plow the Field and Scatter. And so, all good gifts around us are sent from heaven above. So thank the Lord, and thank the Lord for all his love. So that will be a little video that you could play at church if you like, and we hope that it resources churches, and we hope that it does well on social media and draws people in. We've also got some training that we do with people. So on Fridays, we are Friday mornings, we're talking about a theology for faith and life. And in the afternoons, we're talking about stories to win the world. And you can go to speaklifefoundry.com and find links to how you can just tune in and just be part of the learning. So those might be a couple of ways that people can tap into the stuff.
Yeah, excellent. And I mean, the gift went down so well here. I don't know if you've got any, you know, long-term thoughts about it. Is there a gift 2 out there, or other?
Man, yeah, well. You know, I'm so late on Christmas this year. I've got the beginnings of an idea for Christmas this year. We shall see. We shall see. It would be weird if we didn't. I mean, we've been doing Christmas videos since 2012. We've got over 20 Christmas films now. So I don't feel like we need to do one for 2021. But there'd be a lot of disappointed people if we don't. So I think we better.
You set that in motion. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Christmas is cancelled. You don't want to be the person, you know, who cancels Christmas. So. Yeah.
Has anyone got anything else they just want to ask Glenn? You know, anything about Speak Life? Anything? Any comments about, you know, your thoughts about how We Have a Lamb has influenced or impacted you this last year.
I'd like to thank Glenn for writing We Have a Lamb. So all the songs that we've heard during the pandemic, that is the one that has affected me most. And every time I listen to it, it's a different part that really speaks to me. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Julie. Yeah, no, it is. I particularly like it as well, Glenn. I have to say, a couple of years ago, I had a sabbatical and I focused on the Book of Revelation. It's one of my go-to kind of books. So We Have a Lamb was a perfect song for that.
I think it's my favorite verse. Yeah, Revelation 7:17. It's got everything. The Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. It's got everything, isn't it?
It has indeed. Great, Glenn. Is there anything else you wanted to throw our way? Anything that's there on your mind? Anything about prediction for the Ashes this winter? I don't know. You mentioned Ollie Robertson.
5-0.
5-0. Yeah.
Well, Glenn McGrath and Shane Warne every single Ashes.
I know.
No matter when the media asks, 5-0.
Yeah.
We're sending Ian Botham to Australia.
Trade ambassador.
Is he going to walk?
But actually, it's to undermine, it's to win the Ashes as he did back at Old Trafford.
Wow.
You'll always have Old Trafford.
Mhm.
That's 40 years ago this year, isn't it?
Yeah, we didn't win. We last won the World Cup in 1966, and we still.
I know, yeah. I keep hearing about that.
Yeah. Well, Pat, if final call for anyone just to ask anything, or I think I'll just close with a word of prayer if everyone's happy. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I give you thanks for this hour of conversation. I'd like to pray for Glenn and his family, and that your hand of blessing may be upon them, upon the work of Speak Life UK and all involved in the ministry there. And I pray for your blessing upon us here in Saltburn and Newmask. Help us to be faithful in our welcome and our hospitality and our mission and our ministry. Thank you, Father, for your great love and our Lord Jesus Christ. Pray that day will come soon when it will be wiped away. We pray in his name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Glenn, for giving us your I know it's your work and ministry and everything else is very much a busy time and a thoughtful and creative time as well. But thank you for joining us all the way from Eastbourne.
Been a pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. God bless.
Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Glenn.
you so much.
Bye.
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 Bye.